Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. For the past few weeks, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan's future has been increasingly uncertain. Opposition parties in the country are against him, his party's alliance partners have backed away from him, and more importantly, it seems that the Pakistan army as well no longer wants him in his position. On the 3rd of April, that is Sunday, there is going to be a no confidence motion against him, which he is very likely to lose. Yesterday, Imran Khan addressed the nation and said that he will play till the last ball and will come back stronger whatever the result may be.
मैंने स्ट्रगल करके यहाँ पहुंचा हूँ. मुझे स्ट्रगल करनी आती है, मुकाबला करना आता है. मैं किसी सूरत इस साजिश को कामयाब नहीं होने दूंगा. मुझे लोगों ने किसी ने कहा जी वो इमरान खान आप रिजाइन कर दें. मैं रिजाइन कर दूं? मैं जो मेरे साथ क्रिकेट खेलते थे वो सारी दुनिया 20 साल जो मैं खेली है, आखिरी गेंद तक मैं मुकाबला करता हूं. मैं कभी हार जिंदगी में नहीं मानी. मैं तो वोट का जो भी रिजल्ट हो जाए आप देखेंगे कि मैं तो उसके बाद और ज्यादा तकड़ा होकर सामने आऊंगा जो भी रिजल्ट हो.
In this episode, we speak to Indian Express's Nirupama Subramaniun, who reports on South Asian affairs for the paper, about the reasons why Imran Khan finds himself in this position, what he is doing to fight back, and the possible implications for India. So, Nirupama, Imran Khan's future as the Prime Minister is very uncertain. His party's alliance partners have all backed away from it, and he has also fallen out of favor with the army. So let's talk about the army first. The army was the one that had backed him in the beginning. It was the one that got him into power. Why does it not want him to be in power now?
Basically, what has happened is that though the army supported him during the election, and it's an open secret that they did that, they put together people who could join his party. They helped them leave their parties and their original parties and join the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which is Imran Khan's party. They stitched together a coalition for him after the elections. So they did all this. They formed new parties even, like the Balochistan Awam Party in Balochistan. So they even did that. And what happened then was that it started off quite well. And Imran Khan always said that I have absolutely no differences with the army. Army and I are on the same page.
मैं आज आपके सामने कह रहा हूं कि आज पाकिस्तान में मैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर, हमारी पार्टी, हमारी बाकी पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, हमारी फौज, हमारे सारे इदारे एक पेज पे खड़े हैं.
Yeah, and he was almost boasting about it because this would mean that Pakistan would now have a stable government.
Yeah, basically he said, now this is a stable government because I have no issues with the army. Previous dispensations, civilian dispensations like Nawaz Sharif or the PPP have always had tensions with the army. I mean, the tensions are inbuilt into their terms in office because they've always been mistrusted by the army. So there was nothing of the sort here. But so many things happened that changed this same page equation after a while. I mean, the smaller things are easy to suss out. One is that the Imran Khan government became very unpopular because he had promised the moon. He had promised, a modern day Medina, like a complete Islamic paradise where everybody would have enough to eat, they would earn enough, people would be educated, everybody would be healthy, or they'd have access to excellent healthcare. And none of this happened.
अकाउंटेबिलिटी शुरू होगी मेरे से, फिर होगी मेरे वजीरों से, फिर हम नीचे जाएंगे. हमने अपनी बिजनेस कम्युनिटी के साथ मिलकर पॉलिसीज बनानी है ताकि वेल्थ क्रिएशन हो. जितना पैसा बनेगा उतना मुल्क अमीर होगा, उतना हमारा टैक्स ज्यादा इकट्ठा होगा, उतनी हम नौकरियां देंगे लोगों को, अपने नौजवानों को नौकरियां देंगे. मैं आपके सामने, कौम के सामने आज ये कह रहा हूं कि हम पाकिस्तान को ऐसे चलाएंगे जो कभी पाकिस्तान पहले नहीं चलाया गया. वो गवर्नेंस देंगे जो कभी पाकिस्तान में पहले ऐसी गवर्नेंस नहीं आई.
None of this happened, and because the administration did not have the capacity to make it happen. Pakistan is dependent for finances on all outside powers, sometimes grants from Saudi, Abu Dhabi, loans from China, or they were making a lot of money for helping the US in its war in Afghanistan. So basically, it was a completely financially dependent on foreign powers.
Yeah, and they've also had a lot of bailouts from the International Monetary Fund. Like only last month, the IMF released $1 billion from a bailout that Pakistan had secured in 2019. And out of the total package of $6 billion, Pakistan has now received half of that amount. So a lot of bailouts from the IMF.
Yeah, they had bailouts from the IMF. So the economics were not stable at all. And they could not find somebody who could repair it just like that overnight. And then the pandemic struck. When the pandemic struck, then things went south anyway for everybody. And then for economies like this, more so. And when Imran Khan started getting unpopular, the army was apprehensive that it should not get the blame for backing a guy who's so unpopular, because Pakistan army, unlike the Myanmar army and, in other hybrid arrangements, Myanmar army doesn't care about the people, but it craves public approval, the Pakistan army.
And why does it do that? Why does it crave approval, unlike, as you mentioned, the Myanmar army?
Because it sees itself as the guardian of Pakistan's ideology. It can only have the power it has as long as people buy into its framing of this ideology, the way it projects this ideology, the way it projects itself as the guardian of the ideological frontiers of Pakistan.
Yeah, it's almost as if the army doesn't want to fall out of favor with the people. It wants to be popular among them.
Yeah, which is why even when a guy like Musharraf, he does a coup in Pakistan, he ousted Nawaz Sharif in 1999, he fought an election. He held a referendum. Of course, it was a completely sham referendum, but he went through that process. And then he went through the process of setting up a government with something called the King's Party, which was hacked off from Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz Sharif's party, and the Pakistan People's Party. So it was sort of a hodgepodge of all these people who were favorable to him. But I mean, it's just an example to tell you why they do this. They crave that legitimacy because they really think that they are representatives of the people of Pakistan. So the army did not want to get unpopular, and there were rumblings, rumored. We can't really figure this out because what happens within the Pakistan army at the top level is very closely guarded. But I think at that point, they started getting a bit concerned that maybe they have backed the wrong horse. But even then, nothing much happened. There were opposition rallies. You remember that time when this three-party alliance of the PPP, PMLN and Maulana Fazlur Rahman, they were going across Pakistan holding these mammoth rallies, calling out Bajwa. So the army was concerned that it was getting a bad name.
मेरे पाकिस्तान का गरीब पर रहा है बाजवा साहब जवाब आपको देना होगा गरीब की रोटी 10 रुपए की हो गई है बाजवा साहब जवाब आपको देना होगा.
So I think the distancing had kind of begun then, but not really. But I think what really sealed it was when the Pakistan Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, he made a series of transfers. In ordinary times, these are routine transfers and they would have been seen as that. But the transfer of the ISA chief, who at that time was Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid, to head the Peshawar Corps, became a contentious issue because Imran Khan did not sign off on the new person that Bajwa had chosen for that job.
And why did Imran Khan not sign off on that? Because otherwise the whole idea had been that the army and Imran Khan were on the same page. So why did Imran Khan not want this decision to take place?
So this is a little complicated. And I think the thing is that Imran had started seeing Faiz Hamid as the guarantor of another term in office for him. This man is somebody who will help me win the next election. And in a mutual sort of way, in a reciprocal sort of way, I think Faiz Hamid had started seeing Imran as a person who would guarantee him the army chief's job. Or at least this was the impression that they were giving, the two of them. The army does not like somebody in the institution breaking ranks like that and getting close to a politician, or a politician trying to cultivate one of their senior people. So when this happened, suspicions grew in the top echelons of the army that something was afoot. and they wanted to nip it in the bud. And the only way they could nip it in the bud, and it became obvious right then that Imran Khan's days were numbered, that this government is not going to last because he has crossed a red line. And of course, he did many other things. Faiz Hamid also did. Faiz Hamid, at one point was considered a shoo-in to be Bajwa's successor. But he also made some mistakes along the way. I mean, he also started growing close to Imran Khan. So that's on one side. But Imran Khan himself made other mistakes. Like, he was very close to President Trump, and he thought President Trump is going to deliver on the Kashmir issue with India. So Imran Khan's proximity to Trump, or perceived proximity to Trump, did not then transfer itself to the next administration. So the next administration was not enamored of Imran Khan.
Yeah, because the politics of Donald Trump is polar opposite to that of Joe Biden.
Yeah. So Biden and Imran Khan, which is extraordinary. I mean, no new American president comes into office and doesn't speak to the Pakistani Prime Minister for 1.5 years. It's never happened before. And especially, after 2001, Imran Khan and Biden have not had a phone call between them.
And does the army think that Imran Khan is the one to blame for it?
So one thing is that, of course, the US lost interest in Pakistan after they left Afghanistan. And the other thing is Imran Khan's whole attitude, that we are so important, they have to come to us. I think there was a little concern that he's putting people off. And also, I think there was a time when the army was very keen to repair relations with India. And this was very evident from Bajwa's speech last year at something called the Islamabad Security Dialogue, where he made this huge speech about how we care about geoeconomics. The army, our mindset has changed. We are not into geopolitics. Geoeconomics is what will bring us prosperity and peace in the region and connectivity. All these words were flung around.
Dear participants, stable Indo-Pakistan relation is a key to unlock the untapped potential of South and Central Asia by ensuring connectivity between East and West Asia. The potential, however, has forever remained hostage to the disputes and issues between two nuclear neighbors. However, we feel that it is time to bury the past and move forward. Our effort for peace in Afghanistan and responsible and mature behavior in crisis situation with India manifest our desire to change the narrative of geopolitical contestation to geo-economic integration.
Yeah, and one of the things that Pakistan wanted at that time was that it wanted to start trade with India.
So they decided that they're going to start with onions and cotton. And suddenly the government pulled the rug out of that plan. The cabinet said, no, we can't have that. And then there was also Imran Khan's very personal kind of invective against Modi, which didn't go down. I mean, which was making this whole thaw very impossible. It was making it more and more impossible. So although there was the two militaries came to an agreement about observing the ceasefire very diligently, and the ceasefire is from 2003, but it was not being observed at all. A lot of people were dying. They're dying on their side and they're dying on our side. So at that point, the armies came to an agreement in which the Pakistan government had very little role. Even the back channel process, which still appears to be ongoing, seems to have been not so much a creature of the civilian government of Imran Khan, but led by the security establishment on their side and by the security establishment on our side. On our side, of course, the security establishment is subservient to the government. On their side, it is not. So this is the stage for Imran Khan's present situation. And the most important thing was that what I told you about Faiz Hamid, about him trying to block the new appointment for ISI chief.
Right, that and Imran Khan getting unpopular with people, Pakistan's dialogue with United States worsening, and the Pakistan army wanting to improve ties with India. So you have all these different factors going against Imran Khan. How are we seeing it all unfold in Pakistan's politics today?
So the opposition parties saw that this dynamic was playing out between Imran Khan and the army, and they had tried to separate the army and Imran Khan back in 2019. And now this time they saw that it had happened, that the rift had come about because of this ISI appointment. So they immediately put their plans together and came up with this no confidence motion against Imran Khan. And the army, which could have prevented this. Basically, they could have corralled all the dissidents. They could have prevented MQM from leaving. His allies, his coalition partners, they could have prevented. Army can do all this. ISI has been doing this all the time.
Basically, they could have turned things in his favor.
But they said they're going to play neutral. What is neutral here? Neutral means I'm not going to help you. By not helping you, they're actually helping the other side, but they're not saying it. So what all this means is that the army has shown that it is the most predominant political force in Pakistan. That's what it has actually shown. So even anybody who now, let's assume that Imran Khan is going because he does appear to be a minority government, and whatever comes in the place of this government, whether it is a caretaker government or whether it is last 1 year or 3 months. So whatever that is, it will have to play by the rules that Imran Khan had sort of violated. When he began with this same page declaration, Pakistan had accepted a hybrid form of governance where the military and the civilian political leadership, they join hands to govern the country together, like in Myanmar. That's a hybrid government. It was before the present coup. Suu Kyi and the Myanmar army were coexisting in the same government. That was a hybrid government. This was also a hybrid government for all practical purposes. Now, whoever comes next will have to play the rules of this hybridity. No new government can imagine that it has come about to a democratic process. All this is not democracy in action. This is exactly the opposite of democracy. You can pretend that, you're going through a constitutional process, there is a no confidence motion, there are opposition parties, people have crossed sides, and all this happens always in democracies. But this is not democratic. The way it has happened is not democratic in Pakistan. The way people have changed sides, who has changed sides, which other parties that have changed sides, even that is a question. And why have they changed sides? All these trails lead back to the army.
And Nirupama, during this time, how has Imran Khan tried to counter this opposition against him?
So he's been lashing out at people. His language has really deteriorated in public speeches. He has been abusive of people. He's called out the army chief. Then he even said that, what is this? They're saying they're neutral. He said only animals are neutral.
जब अच्छा बुरा होता है तो अल्लाह ने हमें इजाजत ही नहीं दी कि हम न्यूट्रल हो जाएं। जानवर न्यूट्रल होता है, जानवर में अच्छे बुरे की तमीज नहीं होती। इंसान अच्छाई के साथ खड़ा होता है।
So things like that, he sounded crazy at times, the way he's been going on about this. He's a cricketer, so a lot of cricketing metaphors have been used to describe his political career. So he has himself used one saying, I'll play till the last ball. So he has been doing some last minute deal making. He offered one ally the chief ministership of the Punjab province, which he had given to one of his favorites. So that man resigned and he gave it this ally. So the ally stayed with him. Then he tried to woo another ally in Karachi with governorship of the Sindh province. And then he said, okay, I'll give you the cabinet portfolio of shipping, which they had wanted for a very long time. But that didn't work. Those guys didn't stay with him. And then now he has produced a letter which he claims has the contents of a conversation in which the Americans, the Biden administration, is saying that as long as Imran Khan remains in power, the US and Pakistan can't normalize relations. He has to go and then we'll see what happens.
मेरे पास जो ये खत है, ये सबूत है। ये मेरे पास जो खत है, ये सबूत है। और मैं आज ये सबके सामने कहना चाहता हूं कि कोई भी शक कर रहा है ना इस मेरे खत के ऊपर, कोई भी शक कर रहा है, मैं उनको दावत दूंगा। ऑफ द रिकॉर्ड बात करेंगे, लेकिन मैं
आपको खुद देख सकेंगे कि ये मैं किस किस्म की बात कर रहा हूं.
So he has produced this to say, Pakistan खतरे में है, Pakistan की foreign policy खतरे में है, और ये conspiracy है मेरे खिलाफ. So these are the things that he is now attempting to do on Thursday evening. There's going to be a meeting of the National Security Council, and where he's going to discuss this letter. He's already revealed the contents of this letter to journalists and to his allies as he tried to make them stay back with him. So we'll see how it goes when it comes to the vote. There's also a plan that if it comes to voting, which will be held apparently on the 3rd of April, so there's a plan in the PTI that to prevent dissidents from its own party from cross-voting, so no PTI member will attend Parliament on that day.
Wait, his own party should not attend so that they are able to get the right numbers?
So that the opposition doesn't benefit from the numbers of that cross-voting may yield. This is the plan.
Is there a chance that he will get the numbers to keep him in power?
Looks very unlikely at this moment, because there are supposed to be 22 guys in his own party who have crossed over to the other side, to the opposition side. Then there are all the allies who have crossed over. So even without the defectors, it looks like he's already in a minority. Even if they all stay away, he might not make those numbers.
Okay, so let's say Imran Khan goes away. Is there a party or even a plan that the Pakistan army prefers right now?
Oh, it's all speculation and rumor, but they are saying that Nawaz Sharif's brother, Shahbaz Sharif, is an acceptable choice for the army as a caretaker prime minister or somebody to take charge of the government until the next elections at least. And then we'll see. But the army also would not like any one party from becoming very powerful. So in the next election, you might see a fair division of votes, and then Imran Khan may still emerge as a very powerful opposition leader.
And what kind of implications do these changes and the situation in Pakistan have for India?
So the wisdom is there has been absolutely no movement between Imran Khan and Prime Minister Modi. Again, there's absolutely been no chemistry, and there's been a lot of intemperate language from Imran Khan's side against Modi, very personal attacks. And in your own mind, you may think whatever you want to about the Prime Minister of another country, but if you're neighbors and you really claim to want peace, then you're more diplomatic with what you say, how you express your feelings. But this man has not been able to keep control on that. So it is, as I said, there have been no agreements at all, except for that agreement between the two militaries on the LOC, and another one on the Kartarpur corridor, which is again a military security establishment-led initiative. So things have been very frozen since 2008, from the time of the Mumbai attacks. And then, of course, so many other attacks have happened, Pathankot, Uri, and so on. So things have become worse and worse to a point where we now have virtually no relations at all. But the back channel, as I said, is going on, and there's a lot of value to that back channel. For instance, when we had that missile thing.
When we accidentally fired a missile into the Pakistani territory.
Yeah, when we fired missile that changed direction and went into Pakistani territory, the back channel swung into action and prevented what could have become another huge big India-Pakistan row from not blowing up into that. And the reaction on both sides was very restrained, and even Pakistan acknowledged that it might have been a mistake, but India has to explain it. So on, and India has apologized they were very contrite in the way they apologized. So all that was managed by the back channel. So there is engagement, but it is not a public engagement. And that back channel engagement has not yet been able to produce any forward movement in the public sphere, because the Imran Khan government has been very steadfast that they want the status of Kashmir to go back to what it was prior to August 5th, 2019, which India has said again and again is not going to happen. I mean, I can't say this for sure, but I think one can make a guess that what the security establishment might be satisfied with was if India could restore the statehood of Kashmir. And that is something that India has promised anyway to Kashmir, that after the state assembly elections, statehood will be restored. So I think if this government goes, there might be some incremental thawing in the relationship. It may not be huge, it may not be big, but maybe trade will start. Some small things.
And do you think those back channels you talked about, because they are back channels and not something in public, will still remain even when Imran Khan goes away?
Yeah, I think those will remain. they've become kind of institutionalized, is my understanding of what it is.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.